Good. How are you, Yashu?
Well, didn't sleep well, but everything else is fine.
Yeah, we're used to it.
Yeah. So yeah, we both are actually, and we have been there a lot. So guys, as I've already told you that Andrew and I work together already, and he has been quite a
Hey,
known
guys.
personality. He's quite a known personality in the crypto ICO space, and now he's launching one of his own. So we're going to speak about that, Andrew. And before dwelling into your startup, I would like to know your background. I would like you to tell people something about your background in the crypto space.
Sure. Yeah, I've worked on lots of stuff. I got into Bitcoin when it was worth around a couple dollars, but I didn't have much money to invest, so I just worked and hosted lots of events, and I started the CoinFest convention based on just trying to spread Bitcoin adoption, which was a thing I was a heavy promoter of back in the day. Then I got into writing and presenting at conferences and stuff. And yep, community manager at NewsBTC now, of course. I've been doing that for a couple years, spreading the word about what we do. I think you know that much.
Yep, but I just wanted our viewers to know that. Uh,
Yeah, I know.
right. And guys, this is not a favor to Andrew, by the way. He is actually working on something right here, and we're just going to speak about that. Yeah, so I'm actually making it clear because you are working on a very good platform. It's called ESLCoin. And could you tell us more about it?
Well, yeah, ESLCoin as a coin meant to facilitate services for the ESL industry, which stands for English as a Second Language. Um, It's around the world a pretty big industry because it's the most widely spoken and learned language. And a lot of countries know that if you want to sell goods, then you need to speak the language of customers, people with credit cards who are willing to buy lots of stuff. And those people often speak English. You can see that just the debt ratio in America in particular makes us consumers. So if you're an export-oriented economy, that becomes a huge industry there. You know, in places like South Korea and major Chinese cities, a famous ESL tutor can make millions of dollars a year, equivalent in local currency or wherever. Um, just because it's become almost a fad like thing. They're education obsessed in a lot of those cultures. Um, so yeah, just like you can make a coin for any industry that has properties tailor suited for that industry and the people and professionals in it. We're doing that for ESL. Basically, it's a good summary.
Hmm. That's actually interesting. And you just mentioned that ESL industry is very much monstrous in its own way. Why do you think it needs anything like ESL coin when it is already an established business? And how would you revolutionize it?
Oh, it's one of the most. There are a couple things about it in particular, I think, actually, that make it prone to blockchainization or tokenization, however you want to call it. Well, for one, it's disparate and distributed. These people are all over the world and they have to move their money from home to abroad to pay tuition and rent or homestays. All right. And the other thing about it that makes it kind of prime for blockchainization is it's a very middleman prone industry. And that somewhat partially arises from the fact that the professionals and consumers of it often live in different countries.
Mhm.
But you'll find that the agencies that match students with homestays and students with teachers and schools often take massive cuts, like we're talking about, sometimes more than 50%. Um, so some schools will be excited for this. Some agencies might find it threatening, but they're also free to tap into our network without sharing their resources with it. Although we're not giving them any grants for that or anything.
Well, are you giving these figures based on any case studies? I mean, have you actually researched the market before coming up with a concept like ESL coin? Is it true? 50%? I mean, that's a steep.
Yeah. Well, some of the research is shown on our website. If you go where we've shown the size of the ESL industry in dollar figures, you'll see I've provided some links to, or I actually didn't know those numbers. I knew it was huge, but I wanted to know its extent. Uh, so I found actual estimates of its size from a couple years ago and extrapolated by the growth and the number of ESL students to some figures for a few years later, that being today. Um, and you can see it's an $80 billion industry. When last checked in my province alone, here in British Columbia, it's a $3 billion industry a year generated by the ESL industry. But British Columbia is a unique case, probably one of the most attractive locations for ESL students.
Well, it sounds very convincing because you are from Vancouver itself and you might have done the local research. Uh, but my next
Yeah.
question would be that could you tell us more about how it exactly will work? From the point of view of the technology, what kind of technologies are you integrating into this one platform to make it work smoothly as ever?
Well, we're planning to do it on Ethereum for starters,
Okay,
and that's largely because of just the community support out there for Ethereum.
so you're
Um,
not you're not wondering to stick to Ethereum in the future, you mean?
um, if another platform arises that proves superior to Ethereum, we'll switch. Uh, for now, Ethereum, due to the level of support it has, like for example, if you start as an ERC20 token, you can automatically get on wallets and exchanges will be friendlier to you. So
But you
it's
seem to
sensible.
be you seem to be unsure about Ethereum at some point if you're already opening options for other platforms. Why is that?
I just want to keep our options open. We're pretty agnostic,
Hmm.
and Ethereum does have the smart contract capabilities needed to do what we want to do.
Hmm.
In the long term, there may be scaling issues. We've watched
Oh,
CryptoKitties just
right.
wreak havoc all over Ethereum, but in the long term, I think it's likely that someone will tackle those scaling issues. But well, it's hard to think that far ahead in crypto. So it's like it's hard for me to definitively say a
Right.
thing. Um, but for now, the plan is Ethereum because it can do essentially what we need, which is that in addition to just being a currency for ESL students, which is interesting alone due to their limitations with banking, we want to make it kind of a database where if all students and homestays, not for people not familiar with the term, a homestay is when these students will come live with an actual Canadian family, or I think in England and other places they do it as well. And it's kind of like an alternative to a dorm or an apartment where they're getting a first-hand look at the culture of the place they're studying. But those people work with agencies as well, and the agencies take a huge percentage from them, from the homestay operator, which is terrible, of course. We don't like middlemen in crypto. Um, but anyway, yes, if we list all these people on the blockchain with
Hmm.
attributes like age, gender, uh, just all the criteria you might want to search for, price, availability, duration, all the criteria you might typically search for to find a place.
Hmm.
And if you have all of that profile information stored, and that shouldn't be too strenuous on the network. Most of it's numerical data, like the age of a student, gender. It's typically male or female. We may have some extra variables for, whatever, but you get the idea. It's probably pretty easy to do. And then people can search and it can match them with each other through the peer-to-peer network.
Hmm.
Um, so long as people are listed on the network, they can all find each other, and the network can do this at the cost of network resources, essentially, which is much cheaper than most agencies will charge you. And you can do other interesting things as well. Um, this is, I don't know how many viewers have been at university recently, but I'm hoping it's gotten a little better from when I studied. wherein if you want to transfer student records,
Mhm.
you have to send them through the mail, which is a terrible process when I went through it. And I imagine it's still pretty annoying, where you have to go to a particular office and get your test records
Believe me, it is.
sealed and stamped, signed. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
How
I've
was
been
it
there.
for you?
Yeah, it was bad. It was actually worse than you are actually telling. You have to stand in a very long queue to get our documents cleared by the chancellor, and sometimes you
Oh,
have to wait for a week, because the lines were so big, the queues were never ending.
well, it
We didn't
wasn't
have,
that bad for me.
yeah, we didn't have
Jeez.
automated process for that. I mean, now they have it, but not in my time. Now I sound like an
Yeah.
old person, but they didn't have it.
I think they still lack it in many
Yeah,
countries,
right.
and
I mean, yeah, you're right. I
even
mean, I'm not even speaking about in terms of the Western countries who are very well equipped than the Eastern countries, because people still here rely on paper records, and
yeah,
that's one of the one of the biggest backlashes we have been receiving from the education sector.
even then, I went to university here in North America. It was very expensive, and my parents paid for it, and we still use paper records. I think they're just kind of behind a lot of the time. Um, it's it's
So
unfortunate, but with the blockchain, so their essential concerns are twofold: privacy and
mhm,
fraud. And the blockchain is very good at tackling both of these issues.
it is
For
evident.
example, if we want to store the students' IELTS, do you know the IELTS? It's one of several English language tests they'll take,
IOTA, yeah,
and they have to score a certain proficiency to enter in mainstream university education or work visa, etc.
right, right.
Um,
I passed that
it's a pain
actually.
in the ass to send those.
Yeah.
Um, but we could easily the your test results are numerical. We could easily put those on the blockchain,
Mhm,
and we can encrypt them on the blockchain such that the public can't see them if you want to maintain the privacy of your academic records.
mhm,
And we could give a decryption key only to certified schools, who would be the only ones who could then access and see the records. And then we would have to give edit rights, the ability to edit a student's score, only to certified test proctors. So obviously the student will give himself 100% every time. But
well.
that would save a lot of time and money, I think, over the methods we currently use of handling these situations.
So, Andrew, that sounds more like a back-end process, and it's very complex in its nature. How would you plan to make ESL coin easier to be used by the front ends guys, the one who's using the user interface? Do you have an application in mind?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with lots of partners to build apps to facilitate these services. We're working on one ourselves called Try English. Uh, just a point to establish, we're setting it up with a system where the ESLCoin Foundation will hand out grants, developer grants, community grants, to people who build apps on the network. So we all have a stake in its success. My company, our company, Bitlingual, is the first to be doing that. So, no, we need to build these apps so people can interface with the network and do these things. Ours, Try English, will be very student centric. Um, as in the history of ESLCoin, just going back a bit, I worked in this industry prior to working in Bitcoin. It's a long time ago. I guess it was the only other industry I've worked in. I was young, and I hosted events and used my venue connections to get places accepting crypto, stuff like that. But what that means is I have a network of students, ESL students. We'd go to places, and we use chat rooms right now, Skype, WhatsApp, etc., to communicate with each other, because the goal is just practice conversation. Conversational English is what they want to learn. Practical skills. Um, but the apps we're using for conversation are not that great. They all have limitations. Skype does not even let you ban people without setting up a chat bot and stuff. You can kick them, and you have to keep kicking them repeatedly. Uh,
Mhm.
WhatsApp has a maximum number of chat room users it can handle. So our idea was to construct our own. And in the process, we want to start registering students to the ESLCoin network. Um, then on there, they can see all the schools and stuff they often have questions about. We'll set up things like video chat where they can find tutors they might want to practice with,
Hmm.
um, which is another cool feature here. We're partnered with Moody.id, which is
What's that?
one of the companies working on blockchain-based identification. So if a teacher comes at you on the ESL network and says, I'm a certified teacher,
Hmm.
you can safely meet me at this coffee shop for tutoring,
Hmm.
uh, our network can verify that, which is
That's
a
perfect.
concern lately, the safety of students, especially because a student was actually murdered in our city about a year ago. I'm kind of bad with dates now, but yeah, about a year ago.
Well, I have to
Um,
tell you, actually, that's a global issue. It's not just limited to Canada. In my city itself, we have seen plenty of cases like that where students were just simply exposed to such brutality by some so-called teachers, and they were simply tutoring. So yeah, it happens everywhere. So I can see where you're looking at from here. Um,
yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't happen here very often, to be honest. So it was
but
all
yeah,
over the
I mean,
news.
it's not even like
Uh,
it happens
I actually,
often, but it happens. I mean, if you can see
yeah,
it, yeah. So yeah, that's really
but I
messed up.
actually had to talk to the police, which was an issue. Like,
Mm.
so one of our students was the victim, but one of the members of our group, uh, not in a way where we were implicated in any wrongdoing.
Mm.
Uh, when we spoke to the authorities about it, they just wanted to get evidence and stuff. But it was really shocking because it was like one of our students, and we felt kind of like more responsible, although it wasn't our fault, but it was, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, just to know that the platform is actually trying to fix that problem, to a certain extent, that's actually impressive, in my opinion. And I'm not telling you as your friend, but as a general human being itself. Someday I'll have kids. So yeah, I'll be using your
I'm sure.
platform, for choosing tutors for them, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Well,
moving to
it's
the,
pretty.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
I say, yeah, it's a pretty above board project like that. Is what I meant to say. We intend, except for hiding your academic records, it's not a privacy centric protocol.
Mm.
We intend to have KYC and stuff in there, because we're working a lot of crypto viewers who are familiar with me doing stuff with blockchain based video games and CoinFest. A lot of my projects are a lot more decentralized than ESLCoin is. We work with teachers, which means we can't just blatantly disrespect the government and its laws because their careers are on the line, which,
I was just going to ask
yeah,
that actually. I was just going to ask you that. So you can explain it more that how would, because I think if you will be expanding to other geographies in the future, you might face a different set of laws to, make to integrate your platform in. And how do you plan to tackle that in particular manner? I mean, do you have any plans for that?
yeah, we're one step at a time. We actually spoke to the regulators here
Mm.
in British Columbia, and we sponsored the conference for the Teachers of Ontario organization.
Mm.
So we've been trying pretty earnestly to work with them. Um, in doing our ICO, we may do things like uh, KYC ICO
Mm.
participants
All right.
above a certain amount invested. Uh, so that we can get full regulatory compliance, which is our goal for this ICO. Canada is a lot more lenient than the United States,
Mm.
but more lenient than people think. I think the Canadian government is attempting to establish itself as a center for cryptocurrency and blockchain business.
Mm.
As long as we're paying taxes, they don't exactly want us to leave, but they can hand out. I've There are some exemptions they can hand out if
Mm.
they feel really. really safe with what you're doing, and
Mm.
that requires working a lot harder on our MVP and just not being speculative. Don't sell people an idea, but it helps that we have an actual group already in chat rooms. I can show them the users on my phone and demonstrate that we have some established community, and that's not very vapid. But
Impressive.
then we do have to go to other countries as well, right?
Mm.
Not sure what the Americans would think of this idea. Uh, I think
They
I
want to
think in
stick to
England
Canada
it
for
would
a while.
go over fine because
Okay.
I think England is actively trying to maintain its status as a fintech center in Europe and the world in the wake of Brexit. And I've seen a lot of crypto companies around London. Uh, so I think that eventually, well, actually, one of our directors of the ESLCoin Foundation lives in England.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
so I don't see
uh,
that as a huge issue.
well, of course,
But
the expansion would be actually perfect for the Asian countries, especially India and China, even Japan. The students of which they are already constantly looking for English teachers online, and I think they have the maximum number of sign-ups available. In the ESL industry you just mentioned. So yes, the expansion will gonna really help you. So I hope you just don't stick to Canada.
yeah, no. And
Yeah.
we also, yes, have to reach the not just the countries they go to and teachers come from, but we have to
Mm.
reach the countries students come from.
Right.
Um, and the difficulty of that is going to vary wildly. I think Japan's going to be open to the idea at this point. They seem
Mm.
friendly.
Right.
South Korea, which is a huge problem because South Korea is a huge market for ESL, but they still have an active cryptocurrency community. It will be hard to get the South Korean government on board, but not that hard to get people using the app, I think.
Right.
Uh, Government support will probably be restricted to Canada, or, well, I can't even guarantee that for a while. Right now, we're going for let us do it and don't arrest us. But they actually seem pretty open minded from our conversation so far.
As
They,
far I can just presume that the ICO you are doing of ESLCoin, right? It's very well backed by this concrete model. So do you think the investor will be interested in getting into a cryptocurrency like that? I mean, because you cannot promise some certain returns like other ICOs. I mean, most of the people are simply speculators. They're entering this business because they just want to cash out at the moment of prime value, and I don't think it's going to happen with ESL Coin. How do you approach the investors in that case, the ones that will purchase your token?
uh, I refuse to give exact estimates of return to people.
Okay.
I think it's irresponsible to do so.
Mm.
Typically, any operation claiming to do so will fail at some point. They can't maintain that forever. Eventually, the market will swing some way, and uh, or at least from clients I've seen, for NewsBTC clients or projects I've been advisor to.
Mm.
I don't think I've ever seen an ICO accurately predict the amount of funding they will raise. Typically, one or two things happens.
Mm.
Uh, A, sells out super fast. An extreme example like Decentraland, less than a second. Almost no one gets coins except a whale with quick fingers.
Right.
Uh, and then the alternative is just lots of coins left over. Uh,
Mm.
in which case it can go a lot of ways, and then you have to trust the founders to be responsible with that a lot of the
Burn
time.
them.
I've
Right.
seen burn them, distribute them. Uh, and I think people just have to adhere to responsible token economics. Um, we're not trying to raise a ridiculous amount of money. Our pre-sale has been very limited. Our bonus is 10% because we don't need $1 million in our pre-sale. So we're not going out of our
That's
way.
that's impressively blunt, I must say.
Um,
Which I don't actually listen
wh-
from other ICOs too often. I mean, so you are coming up with a very little number, which is itself a proof that you're trying to create something within a very tight budget. And
Well, it's
if you just fall short of the funds, I mean, have you ever planned this that you can fall short of funds? So you might need to do another ICOs in the future. Are you open to that?
I'd rather not.
All
I've
right.
seen it be very complicated unless it becomes a situation where we're like expanding to additional languages in the
Mm.
future.
Okay.
But that's far from now. But um I'm not too worried about that aspect. I've been helping a lot of ICOs in the past. Like
Mm.
we just had Autonio have some success, a NewsBTC client, been an advisor to,
Great to hear.
and the key again of keeping our pre-sale and such small is if our pre-sale was large, like some ICOs do, what's going to happen if they get a huge discount? They're going to dump, and
Right.
then the price will even out to the effective price given the pre-sale discount level.
Right.
We don't want to do that to our investors, and we're not going to. Um, and the
Right.
same, another thing you have to consider is smaller things have more room to grow. Uh, there's a good way to think about this is in target market caps. Cryptocurrency can have a certain market cap that's reasonable for it to have. More than that for a certain industry is ridiculous. Like some industries, a coin in that industry might make sense to have a higher market cap than others. So if you raise more money in the ICO, then that doesn't make the maximum possible size of the market you can reach get bigger. It
Mm.
just makes the amount of growth you can achieve between your starting point and end point less, which is fine for you, the developer, but for your ICO investors implies smaller percentage returns eventually.
Profitable.
Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
realism.
Realism. Yeah, that's pretty much correct. So when does your ICO start? I mean, that's going to be my last question of the interview, by the way.
Looks like we're delaying now to April 22. Uh, we were going to do it a while ago, but then the whole thing where we're talking to regulators and stuff like that is really time consuming, and yeah, that pushed things back. And now, some of the people we work with can move very slowly as well. Uh,
Well, you're looking for
Governments and
regulations. Yeah,
states.
it can be a tedious
Uh,
task. Well,
yeah, so we're gonna put it off for a bit longer,
so
basically,
April is still a
and
tentative time, you mean? I mean, you're not sure that you will start in April. I mean, it can be some other date.
it could be, but April's enough time, and it would be a cool time because then our ICO starts with the beginning of
Mm.
International English Language Day, which is a
Wow.
day established by the United Nations, which is kind of a cool time to start your ICO for ESLCoin.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I must appreciate the marketing plan behind that. I mean, it's still it's very good actually. Um, so we'll be looking forward to the ICO, and I must say that I was particularly intrigued by your explanations on the regulation part and how you are, trying not to raise much funds because you think it's gonna impact your ICO very negatively, and that's very blunt and that's very honest. I hope you viewers also think the same, and they will be looking forward to your ICO. So thank you very much, Andrew, for
Thanks,
speaking to
man.
us.